At the Wild Salmon Center, we're trying to do something that's never been done. Protect a network of the Pacific's greatest and wildest rivers so they can survive this century. It has obvious planetary and community benefits, but it's also very personal for me, our staff, and so many of you, our supporters. Protecting this fish and these rivers, this is my life's work. I learned how to fly fish in my teens, and that opened up a new world for me. A river is a mystery and it's a gift, and understanding how to fish that river opens up all these little doors and portals into all the different pieces of that ecosystem. When I first saw Pacific salmon, I could not believe their strength and their size. And for a moment, I felt connected to all the things that add up to the beauty and the mystery that makes life on this planet work. The more I learned about salmon, the more I was awed by these fish. Salmon are anadromous. They migrate from fresh water to the ocean and then back again. This is their superpower. It's what makes them both unique and invaluable to us. Salmon swim thousands of miles out to the nutrient-rich waters of the North Pacific. And when they return to spawn in their natal rivers, they deliver the ocean's superfood inland into the estuaries, forests, and even high into the mountain ranges. These fish connect the land to the sea, feeding an entire ecosystem along the way. And they feed us. In a salmon ecosystem, everything thrives. Salmon are called a keystone species because the health of the Pacific Rim is literally built on them, from the soil and the trees to the apex predators like the orca and the eagles. And they're especially important to humans. So as these fish migrate through these waterways each year, they operate much like red blood cells, circulating in the Earth's veins and arteries. When they're choked off, the land and entire river ecosystems suffer. The land suffers and the people suffer. And the salmon runs have been winking out. It's been starting in the south and it's working its way north. It's caused by the loss of habitat from building dams, cutting forests down, pumping the water out of the rivers. And that's been compounded by overfishing. And this has all been accelerated by climate change. And once they're gone, it's really hard to bring them back. So it is one of the most intractable and challenging conservation issues of our generation. But we're just at a moment right now when we can still change the trajectory. We want future generations to experience truly wild rivers and have that reciprocal relationship with wild salmon. That's why we implemented the Stronghold strategy 25 years ago. Back in the 1990s, we had a crisis here in the Pacific Northwest. The salmon runs were collapsing. Some of the runs were down to 3% of their historic abundance. It occurred to me that we need an approach that can prevent the next generation of those declines. We've got to restore the ones that are at the edge of extinction, but not all the rivers were in deep trouble yet. So we thought, well, let's just be strategic about this and think about the next 100 years. Let's go to those rivers that are still strong and prevent bad things from happening to them. And this became the core of the Stronghold approach, a deliberate long-term strategy to save the last best watersheds in each part of the Pacific Rim. We are now halfway to our goal of protecting the 20 greatest salmon strongholds. The Stronghold Archipelago, when protected, will be the most ambitious conservation strategy for any species ever attempted across the Pacific Rim. At the core of our strategy is the people, the local champions on the ground, leading the work, and you, the wider community, engaging and supporting wild places. Banding together is the only way to protect strongholds and our planet. We're all part of the same web of life. We all need wildness. And the best way to answer that longing is to step into a beautiful river. Stand in that cold, clear water and feel the current flowing. Let yourself connect to this planet, because the truth of it is, you, the rivers, the fish, we're all connected. And together we'll save one of the greatest ecosystems on Earth.
Good afternoon and welcome to Wild Salmon Center's 2025 Headwaters virtual event. My name is Kim Kosa. I'm the Development Director here at Wild Salmon Center. As many of you know, WSC is an Oregon-based conservation organization, but with a global impact. We work to conserve the most important wild salmon ecosystems around the entire Pacific Rim. And in doing so, we're also working to safeguard the communities, local economies, and other wildlife that rely on the returns of salmon every year. Today, we'll hear some updates from WSC experts on where their work stands today. As you heard in Guido's welcome message, wild salmon conservation is really at a pivotal moment right now, both in terms of new threats as well as some opportunities coming up on the horizon. Our staff and our partners are working every day to safeguard these key watersheds, so we're very proud to share these updates with you, as well as an announcement about an exciting new film coming out in 2026. So all of that to come in a moment. First, we'd like to thank our presenting sponsor for this year's Headwaters, which is Row Adventures. Stick around to the end of the program to learn about your chance to get a slot on a 6-day rafting trip on the main Salmon River next year through Row Adventures. Also, RSVPing for today's event has entered you for the chance to win a giveaway from one of our sponsors. So thank you to Sage, Sea Run Cases, NRS, Patagonia Provisions, Loon Outdoors, and Jacobson Salt for your support. We'll announce the winners of those giveaways at the end of the hour. On the live stream page here, you'll see a chat box. We'd be curious to hear what brings you to salmon conservation, whether you're an angler, a kayaker, a hiker, or you just love the wild places where wild salmon still run. Let us know in the chat if you feel so inclined. Also on this page, you'll see a donate button. If you feel inspired by what you hear today, we hope you'll consider making a year-end gift to help fuel this work moving forward. So now, first up, I'd like to welcome our Vice President of Conservation, Mark Trenholm, with a report on the state of salmon across the North Pacific. Mark, I'll hand it over to you.
Hello, my name is Mark Trenholm, and I'm the Vice President of Conservation here at the Wild Salmon Center. I appreciate you joining us today for our second installment of Headwaters. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to provide an overview of our work as we near the end of what has been a uniquely challenging, but also a very successful year. As you know, this administration and Congress have sought to remake government and establish new norms for how business is conducted in Washington and across the whole country. In the midst of so much change, it has been essential for us to hone and thoughtfully deliver our messages for wild salmon. As we've made the case to our federal partners and their supporters, we have found, not surprisingly, that wild salmon and wild rivers, these are values people on both sides of the aisle can support. But we've had to do the work, tell our story, educate, build more champions in Washington and beyond. Because of the work we put in, there have been real opportunities to make progress. First off, in Alaska, I'm pleased to report that there have been some very positive developments in our work to protect Bristol Bay. You'll hear more about these and other conservation opportunities shortly from our Alaska Program Director, Emily Anderson. In the lower 48, our habitat restoration teams in Oregon and Washington are wrapping up their field seasons and the implementation of over 30 on-the-ground habitat restoration projects. These efforts restore and reconnect habitats for wild salmon and steelhead. On the Olympic coast in Washington, roughly half of the state's non-listed salmon swim home to stronghold rivers like the Queets, the Quinault, the Hoh, and the Quileute. Unfortunately, tributaries to these rivers are often fractured by outdated and impassable culverts. These failing structures act like dams, cutting off access to spawning reaches for returning adults and critical cold water refuge for juveniles. We're leading a campaign called Cold Water Connections, where we're replacing these culverts and reconnecting headwater spawning areas. Complementary projects also improve habitats in these and other tributaries by reconnecting floodplains and improving in-stream habitats. These photos show a couple of projects completed just last month. On Cedar Creek, a tributary of the Quileute River, our team removed the last fish passage barrier in the watershed by replacing a failed culvert with this bridge. On a tributary to Elk Creek in the Quinault Basin, we've replaced another barrier with this countersunk culvert. In Oregon, our restoration efforts generate similar benefits but follow a much different model. Here, we collaborate with communities up and down the coast to prioritize watershed restoration strategies that accelerate the recovery of Oregon coast coho. After completing in-depth prioritization plans, we then raise money for local partners to implement the work. Since 2019, Wild Salmon Center has raised almost $20 million for locally led implementation of the highest priority projects contained in those plans. One example shown here is the recently completed Lower 5 Mile project, just north of Reedsport, Oregon. Wild Salmon Center funded this U.S. Forest Service designed project through an award to the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians. The project resulted in the reconnection and restoration of over 50 acres of floodplain habitats that were previously disconnected due to a deeply incised stream channel. Interestingly, this site provides some of the highest densities of spawning coho found on the entire Oregon coast. Wild Salmon Center now has $26 million in proposals pending with our federal partners for work on the Washington and Oregon coasts. These are funds we've leveraged from your generous support. We're now working with the Trump administration to see these awards approved, so we can recover our coastal salmon populations and rebuild fisheries in the lower 48. In addition to our restoration program, our decades-long effort to strengthen protections for healthy forests in Oregon is nearing the finish line, with major victories on the horizon. If you've been following our work the last few years, you know we've had major breakthroughs negotiating changes to logging practices on private forests with the timber industry. And we've promoted ecological forestry on over 500,000 acres in Western Oregon. Wild Salmon Center is currently leading efforts with our conservation partners to ensure that Habitat Conservation Plans, or HCPs, are finalized for Oregon state forests and across more than 10 million acres of private forest lands. Once adopted, these plans will provide greater protections for aquatic habitats throughout our coastal strongholds and other areas of the state. These plans do require federal approval, however, and Wild Salmon Center has been working closely with the administration to ensure their support. As always, science remains the through line and the North Star of our work. This year, we published a peer-reviewed retrospective on our salmon stronghold strategy in the journal Fisheries. This paper shows the significant impact of the stronghold strategy over the last 30 years, not just on salmon, but also on the entire North Pacific ecosystem. You can check out that paper and a summary of it on our website. On the ground, our science team continues to advance critical research and develop innovative tools to better manage our fisheries. For example, Salmon Vision, which we featured in the July episode of Headwaters, is an AI-driven tool that we have developed to more effectively measure salmon runs. It's now established in 15 systems in British Columbia and Alaska, and we hope to be working in 50 watersheds in the lower 48 by 2030. We're excited about the potential for AI to deliver real-time data and power adaptive management so we can better balance wild fish conservation with fishing opportunities. In addition, we're advancing cutting-edge work on salmon genetics that is deepening our understanding of the genetic variations that underpin wild fish diversity. This research has already begun to improve the management of our fisheries and can have profound conservation benefits in the decades to come. In Mongolia, we're examining how environmental changes on the ground are affecting the largest salmonid on Earth, the taimen. Similar research on other salmonids is underway in Alaska, BC, and the Pacific Northwest. Collectively, these research programs and others like it that we're advancing around the Pacific Rim will substantially improve the management of our wild salmon and steelhead populations. Later in this webinar, you'll hear from James Losey with our Washington program about work underway in the Olympic Peninsula to better understand spring Chinook migrations. Finally, but certainly not least, I'm pleased to share that we've stood up a new program in British Columbia this year under the leadership of Greg Knox, with whom we've worked for the last decade in the province. The program has hit the ground running as we review and update our stronghold maps in BC, develop new partnerships to protect critical habitats, and work with First Nations and other partners to advance critical fisheries reform. We'll be sharing the progress in these and other areas of our new BC program in a future Headwaters episode. Before I pass the mic to my colleagues, I'd like to conclude with a reminder that, like salmon, our work transcends borders and is driven by goals that span generations. But the work to reach these goals starts today, in the near term. And you, as viewers, supporters, and advocates, are the key to our success. Thank you for your continued support and for making your voices heard on behalf of wild salmon and wild salmon strongholds. We're very proud to share today's update, and we invite you to keep following our work.
Thank you, Mark. Next, we're going to dive a little bit deeper on a few of Wild Salmon Center's specific conservation programs. First up is Alaska, where, as many of you know, several of the North Pacific's most important strongholds are located, in particular Bristol Bay. Our Alaska Program Director, Emily Anderson, is here to share some updates on her team's work in Alaska to protect key strongholds in the state. Emily, I'll pass it off to you next.
Thanks so much, Kim. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Again, my name is Emily Anderson, and I'm the Alaska Director for the Wild Salmon Center. We have a lot going on in Alaska, but I really wanted to focus on some good news for Bristol Bay and our ongoing work to protect this incredible region from the proposed Pebble Mine project. Many of you have followed this work over the years, but for those of you who are new to the issue, I just wanted to provide a little bit of background information about the importance of Bristol Bay. Bristol Bay is located in southwest Alaska and has long been a key salmon stronghold for Wild Salmon Center. Each year, on average, 40 to 60 million sockeye salmon return to the rivers and large lakes in the region. This incredible migration makes Bristol Bay a global salmon powerhouse, producing over half of the world's supply of sockeye salmon. In turn, this incredible bounty of salmon supports a $2.2 billion annual economy, 21,000 commercial and sport fishing jobs, and provides a key subsistence resource that nourishes entire communities and supports cultural traditions and a way of life practiced for millennia. Now, for over nearly 2 decades, this incredible region has been threatened by the proposed Pebble Mine project, a toxic metallic sulfide mining deposit located at the headwaters of the Nushagak and Kvichak rivers, 2 of Bristol Bay's biggest salmon producers. For over a decade, we have worked with tribes and our business and conservation partners to protect Bristol Bay from the proposed Pebble Mine project. And in recent years, we've had some really significant victories, and many of you have been with us along the way. In 2020, the Army Corps of Engineers denied a key Clean Water Act permit for the mine, essentially stopping the mine in its tracks. And in 2023, the Environmental Protection Agency doubled down and used a very rarely used authority under the Clean Water Act to make the area in and around the mine site off limits to mining. Now, these were incredible federal victories, but as you can imagine, we are still in a battle. The mining company, Northern Dynasty Minerals, hasn't given up the fight and has challenged both decisions in court, and we are in active litigation. But this summer, we received some really great news from the Trump administration that the administration will continue to defend both of those protective decisions in court. This is an incredible development for Bristol Bay and for our chances of upholding those protections with the full weight of the federal government backing it. Now, we can never put all of our eggs in one basket. While those lawsuits proceed through the courts, we are working on layering and expanding those protections at the state level. And in May, we had some incredible news when several state lawmakers introduced the Bristol Bay Forever Act, which would prohibit metallic sulfide mining, the kind of mining that is so dangerous to salmon populations within the entire 36,000 square mile state-designated Bristol Bay Fisheries Reserve. If passed, this legislation would effectively defend the watershed from both the Pebble Mine project and the 20 other known mineral deposits in the region. It would also mark a huge step towards our ultimate goal of layered and durable protections for this irreplaceable salmon fishery and all who depend on it. I just wanted to say thanks so much for many of you who have supported these efforts over the years. We clearly are playing the long game here, but we know it's worthwhile and we can't stop until Bristol Bay is permanently protected. We're glad you're with us. Thanks so much for your continued support and for joining us today.
Thank you, Emily. Now moving south, we'll land in British Columbia, which is home to several remarkable wild salmon and steelhead watersheds. In 2025, Greg Knox joined Wild Salmon Center as our first British Columbia program director after more than 2 decades working in the Skeena River watershed in BC. Greg, I'll hand it over to you for an overview of our efforts in British Columbia today, as well as some upcoming conservation opportunities.
Hi everyone, my name is Greg Knox. I'm the British Columbia Program Director for Wild Salmon Center. And Wild Salmon Center has been working in BC for over 12 years, supporting local conservation and Indigenous partners on the ground through things like with technical support, science support, fundraising, communications, and convening support. I've been in this role now for about 6 months, but I have about 20 years experience in salmon conservation work in BC. So I've been working to expand our program, bring on new capacity, and a key opportunity we've been working on lately is to help establish new protected areas in the province, and specifically in stronghold watersheds throughout the province. Our federal and provincial governments have committed to protecting 30% of the land base by 2030. And we're really trying to leverage this to protect critical salmon habitats across the province. And another key area we're focused on is protecting new and emerging salmon habitats, because glaciers are melting, some systems are becoming warmer, more productive, the really cold systems. Salmon are moving into new habitats, and we are working with local partners on the ground to protect these new emerging habitats through this work. We're also working throughout the rest of the province in stronghold watersheds to really support conservation and Indigenous partners in new protected areas, and we're hoping to really expand the network of protected areas in these stronghold watersheds over the next 5 to 6 years. And this is really starting to hit the ground in a big way through our program. Another big area we've been focused on is helping expand selective fisheries. And with climate change and the environmental variability we're seeing salmon and steelhead populations returns come back and really become much more variable in recent years. Some populations aren't doing so well. Some populations are really productive and doing really well. So the only real way we can keep communities tied to salmon, make sure First Nations and fishers can access salmon, is to increase the selective nature of fisheries. And so First Nations, did this historically for thousands of years. They fish with selective fishing technologies and in locations where you could really select out strong populations and let weak ones go on to the spawning grounds. And so there's a lot of work being done right now, and a lot of interest by First Nations to expand these types of selective fisheries. Things like fish wheels, beach seines, fish traps, weirs, and this is really using old technology and with modern technology and combining the two to really be able to select out those strong populations and have high survival rates for weaker populations or species like steelhead and Chinook salmon. So some of the things we're helping with is, again, fundraising, technical capacity to just get these fisheries in the water in season, communication support to help tell the story. There's amazing people doing amazing things across the province, and really expanding the knowledge of what's going on, and also sharing the knowledge amongst these fishers is really a key part. And another big focus is helping with markets access. So there's a lot of higher end markets want to buy selectively caught fish. And what we're working to do is to help enable that by connecting selective fishers to higher end markets. So we can get more price per pound for these fish, which will make these fisheries sustainable over the long term. So that's an update on our BC program. Again, I just want to say thank you to our amazing partners in BC, and it's really a privilege to work with all of you and to be connected to this community of salmon people. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Finally, we're going to turn to James Losey, who is our Washington Senior Wildfish Manager. James and his Oregon counterpart, Kirk Blaine, joined our team last year to advance protection specifically for wildfish populations in their respective states. James, I'll hand it over to you to talk a little bit more about your work in Washington, as well as a project underway right now on the Olympic Peninsula.
Hi, everybody. My name is James Losey. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight. We're going to talk a little bit here about some of the management work we're doing in our stronghold systems in Washington State and ways we're trying to maximize all that other effort we've been working on in the science program, our habitat practitioners, to really get the most benefit we can out of all that work and make sure when these fish return into these management and fish harvest regimes, we've created all the tools to support them. So to get started, I wanted to just show you a picture of how salmon are moving on the west coast of Washington State and more broadly across the United States, Canada, Alaska. This map shows how Chinook salmon are migrating through the ocean. The reason I think this is so important to understand is that as fish move through this system, they're intercepted by a variety of fishers. So this could be commercial fisheries, this could be sport fisheries in the river, or tribal ceremonial subsistence or commercial fisheries in the river. So it's a really complicated management framework, and Wild Salmon Center is really upping their game in how we engage in this process and make sure fish have all the tools they need to thrive into the future. So if we zoom in a little bit on Washington State, the map on the left shows some of the places that we're working there. These are these stronghold systems, places where a lot of the habitat is really just intact and the landscape is set up in a way to support salmon for the long run. So we want to find those places where improvements needed and to support those folks in the watersheds doing that work. But we also want to create new tools and bring in new technology that'll help fish managers support salmon in these areas. The photo on the right shows the Hoh River. I'm going to talk more about the Hoh River, but if you look at the map, you can see the Hoh River is situated right in the middle of these stronghold systems. And overall, it's just a beautiful place to work. And I love this photo from the air showing this sort of natural system where it falls right into the Pacific Ocean. The waves crashing right on that freshwater. Really cool area. And here I'm going to talk a little bit about that technology I mentioned. We've become experts here with acoustic telemetry. And this has been just a game changer for us to understand how fish are moving through these stronghold systems. We can identify the gains that we've made through habitat work, but we can also identify places where maybe there's more work to be done and prioritize these areas where salmon are moving quickly through the watershed and avoiding certain parts of the habitat that maybe we could improve. So what you're looking at here on the left is this little cartoon that shows a fish moving through this system of acoustic receivers. These are like 2-liter bottles of soda. They record the movements of fish that we've tagged. The map on the right with these little orange dots shows that now is the time to do this. We have partners all over the West Coast, both federal, state, and private folks that are tracking fish in their area. These could be sharks or sturgeon or salmon. And of course, what we're interested in is tagging salmon and watching them move through this system of receivers. And that allows us to identify their specific locations at different times and places, and also see how they're moving through these fisheries or other challenges that they're experiencing in the environment. This is a short little cartoon showing how we've done this in other areas. This is an inland fjord. You can see this really cool 3D map that we've created that shows the bathymetry of this fjord. And what we know is when we have these acoustic receivers placed in the environment, maybe tied to logs or maybe tied to existing structures like docks, we can use those to track these tagged fish and identify really precisely, specifically, every couple minutes, how these fish are interacting with the environment. So that's these little blue dots racing around. You can imagine there's places like on the left where there's really heavy fish use. Fish are moving around on the left pretty actively, but maybe on the right, there's places where fish are not using. And that could be because there's some type of temperature barrier, or maybe there's some other kind of threat that we can identify now and respond to. So this is just a brief summary of how this tech works. Now, if we go back to the Hoh River, that's the map here on the left, we can see if we place our own receivers in these green and red dots, we can focus very specifically on the species that we're engaged with. So we can tag Chinook salmon or coho, maybe other trout, bull trout like cutthroat, and understand how they're moving through these areas that we're protecting. The photo on the right just sort of demonstrates this is really collaborative. A lot of this work is led by the Hoh tribe in this specific system, but also just a variety of federal, state, and partners from other places that are familiar with this technology. So this is a picture of a Chinook salmon. I just wanted to show what this looks like when we actually are handling fish in these stronghold systems and asking these fish to show us how they're using the environment and maybe show us areas we can improve. So this is a Chinook salmon from the Hoh River. You can see it's got this backpack on its back. This is the tag that we're using to track the fish, and it's sort of sounding and identifying its location as it moves through the environment. We collect scales, these traditional tools we've used for, maybe 50 years in these systems. We can understand the age, the life history of these fish. We look at their length and their weight to understand the health. Of course, we collect genetic samples. In our state-of-the-art genetics lab at Wild Salmon Center, we're able to identify simple things like the sex of the fish or, of course, the species, but also really complex understanding of the run type. And try to understand, are these spring Chinook or fall Chinook, and how are these different run types using the environment differently? And then we can look at adipose fins to see how our hatchery and wild fish interacting with these stronghold systems in different ways. And then for this presentation, we grabbed some of the data out of the system. So this is like the first sneak peek at what we're seeing in the Hoh River right now with this new tracking technology. This map just shows, hot off the press, the size of the bubbles show where fish are moving and how many detections we've had in specific areas. So if you just look at all the different fish we've tagged, lots of different species in the Hoh River to try to understand the broad understanding of species complexity and movement patterns, we can see that both the lower river and the upper watershed are really important places for fish. We also see these migratory corridors where fish are moving more rapidly through the system with these smaller red dots, and maybe even identify places we expected fish to use, but they didn't. So that's where we can come together as a team, try to understand, are there places in the Hoh where maybe we need to engage with the fisheries more directly, or maybe there's habitat improvement that has gone overlooked in the past. If we zoom in here on a particular species, these are our Chinook salmon, and we could just see really quickly with this first look that this lower river is really important. There's a lot of action happening for Chinook salmon, and we know now that Chinook salmon from all over the West Coast are dipping into the Hoh River, this glacial-fed cold water system, as refuge as they continue their migration south. We also know a lot of fish are moving into the Hoh River and spawning successfully, so this is really great news. Many of you may be familiar with cutthroat trout, this really cool fish that's important to the ecosystem here in the Hoh and also all across the Pacific Northwest. We know in places we tag cutthroat trout, they like to stay in those places. These are big beaver dams, complexes. But we also see some cutthroat trout exhibiting this anadromous sea run life history, and they're moving all the way to the surf zone out in the mouth. And then finally, I wanted to show you a picture of a bull trout here. I love this photo. This is one of our volunteers that caught this bull trout. We tagged this fish, so it has an acoustic transmitter that's emitting its location. Bull trout are really cool. They're cold water critters, important predators in the system. And we know that they really like this super cold water in the upper watershed near the glacier. But they also go through these complex migration patterns like a cutthroat trout or even a salmon where they actually enter the ocean and move into other systems. So I just want to thank you for letting me share some of the work we're doing in Washington to better understand fish management and how we can improve it and take all that exciting work we've been doing for the last few decades and bring it all together into a package in Washington State to maximize the power of these stronghold systems.
Huge thanks again to Emily, Greg, and James for joining us today and sharing those insights on where their work stands at the moment. Before we wrap our program, we want to share one more exciting announcement with you all. As you've been hearing, wild salmon and steelhead are at a pivotal tipping point at the moment. If we don't act now, the loss or decline of this keystone species would really threaten the well-being of ecosystems and communities across the North Pacific. At the same time, wild fish and wild rivers have this amazing and unique ability to bring people together. And more now than ever, it's critical that more people across the nation and beyond know the story of salmon and can come together to join this movement to protect our remaining strongholds and really build the next generation of champions for wild salmon. To that end, we're excited to share that we've been working with IMAX film production partners to release Running Wild, which will be a beautiful and immersive giant screen film experience about the life cycle of salmon, stronghold rivers, and the wildlife and people that rely on this remarkable fish across the North Pacific. Running Wild will be released in early 2026, but we want to share an exclusive sneak peek at some of the footage from the film with you all today. So here is your first look at Running Wild. We are so excited to share that film with the world and hope you are too. Stay tuned for more information about Running Wild and upcoming screening events coming to a city near you, and we encourage you to attend and join us when the time comes. Now, before we get to our giveaway winners, one thing we are asked every fall is how folks can help support this work. As you've heard today, we have some significant conservation goals, and are facing some major headwinds at the same time. And it's you, our supporters, that help us reach these goals. So here are 3 ways to help support Wild Salmon Center in their efforts. First is with your financial support. If this work resonates with you, we hope you'll consider making a year-end gift in support of salmon strongholds and making WSC a priority for your giving. As you can see on the event page here, there's a donate button, or you can visit our website to make a contribution this fall. And as a special giving incentive, thanks to Row Adventures, anyone that gives $100 or more between now and November 7th will get the chance to win a spot on a 6-day rafting trip on the Main Salmon River. And of course, huge thanks to those of you on this call that are already supporting WSC's work. Secondly, sign up for our emails. Make sure you're following us on social media. This is a great way to get the latest updates, take action at key moments, and to hear about Running Wild film screening events coming up next year. Thirdly, please share these stories with your network on social media. Bring them to an event. Help us spread the story of wild salmon. Now, let's get to our giveaway winners from our sponsor prizes. The winner of our first prize package featuring a versatile life jacket from NRS is Gordon Brinzer. Okay, the winner of our second package featuring a beautiful wool blanket from Pendleton and goods from Patagonia Provisions and Jacobson Sea Salt is Joanne Schlachter. And the winner of our final package, including a rod and reel from Sage, a travel case from Sea Run Cases, and fly tying tools from Loon Outdoors, is John Altschuler. Congratulations to all of our winners, and thank you all again for joining us today. That's the end of our program, but we hope you'll stay tuned for all the exciting work yet to come. And we'll leave you with one final video, which is a look at the dedicated staff at Wild Salmon Center. Thank you all again.
There's a lot of things I'm proud of at the Wild Salmon Center.
I've been here for over 10 years.
10 years, 17 years. We at Wild Salmon Center have such a powerful team. The impact of the work we're doing is felt both locally and regionally.
I get to do really amazing work, but the reason I stay is because I get to do the work with really incredibly talented, caring humans.
We have lawyers, we have communications experts, we have incredible biologists.
Knowing that you're working to improve the world is a really powerful thing.